I want to quickly explain to you the different payment processing tiers that you can really expect to have if you are a merchant and you're looking for a payment processor. So here are the facts I want you to pay attention to. One thing for sure, when you think about payment processing tiers, pricing tiers, you are speaking about cash outflows because this is actually this is an expense for you. Okay, so basically, of course, this expense is tax deductible, but it's still an expense. Okay, so one of the most important considerations when selecting a payment processor this year is actually to figure out which processing structure the processor actually offers, or simply how they structure their merchant fees. It's all about clarity. It's all about accountability. It's all about efficiency. You want to see, you want to really understand what kind of games they are playing. Because see, the thing is, unfortunately, some payment processors like to play games. Sometimes you might have some pricing shenanigans on your statement, and before you know it, you pay a lot more than you thought you'll be paying with this payment processor. So that's really important to understand that you want to really clarify what kind of contractual agreement you sign with the payment processor in the first place. So it's really important to understand, therefore, what the different pricing structures are, and how they will affect your monthly statement, so you can really select the billing arrangement that works best for your business. Remember that your business actually has to come out of this whole arrangement positive. It has to come out. It has to come out. Let's say, it has to come out like on the positive side in terms of cash flows. And so you want to really understand that your industry, the demographics of your customers, will also affect the pricing tier, especially the industry. Some industries are considered high risk versus others. Okay, so in today's conversation, what I will do is I want to break down for you how the rates and fees are divided up, so you can understand how much your credit card processor is actually making off each transaction. Again, going back to what I said, it's about cash inflows and cash outflows. Cash inflows are for your payment processor and cash outflows for you. So take the time to understand how your processor determines its rates so that you can really avoid sticker shock when you get your first statement. That's what I said about those pricing shenanigans. Okay, so it's one of those things where you got to really ask yourself: do you want interchange plus pricing? Do you want flat rate pricing? Do you want tiered pricing? Or do you want differential pricing? Let's talk about that. Let me first talk to you about interchange plus pricing. This is really important this year. So, often considered the most honest and affordable pricing model in the industry, interchange plus pricing creates a very transparent relationship between a merchant and their processor. So, maybe this is what you want to consider this year. Okay, so it's called interchange plus pricing. So, with this pricing model, a lot of things happen, but the whole conversation should be around transparency. So with this pricing model, the processor margin will be a set percentage for each transaction, while the interchange fee, which fluctuates depending on which type of transaction is being processed, will dictate the final cost of a given transaction. So you have basically a static aspect of the pricing model. Then you have a variable portion of it. So a fixed portion, and a variable portion. Okay. Now, when you think about interchange plus pricing, it means that whenever you process a transaction that's eligible for a lower interchange fee, you will save money compared to if the transaction was completed using a flat rate. So that's really the gist of the interchange plus pricing model. Okay, and so while interchange plus pricing may seem more complicated to begin with because of the many different interchange rates out there, it can really result in significant savings for your business. Again, it depends on what kind of niche your business in, what kind of geography where you're at. Like, if you were processing your credit card transactions, say in New York versus in somewhere in Bali or Acapulco, Mexico, your model will be different. Okay. Also, it's the same thing. You could be in the States, but if your customers are actually charging or paying from that geography, you also could have a heightened risk, and therefore a different pricing tier. So, bottom line is the first pricing tier, the first pricing tier I want you to remember here is interchange plus pricing. The next one I want you to really think about here is flat rate pricing. So if your payment processor charges a flat rate pricing structure, then they have taken the interchange, the card brand fee, and their margin fee to determine one single rate that will be applied to all the transactions that your business processes as a flat fee. So what the processor is really doing here is that like they're trying to really get away from those variable like those fluctuations, like those variable pricing tiers. They want to have a static pricing tier across the board, no matter what. Okay, and this pricing model has its pros and cons, but anyway, so that's really important. Now, because this is a flat pricing structure, you will pay 2.9% on all your transactions. Sometimes it's 3.5%, sometimes it's 3.2%. The percentage really depends on the calculations that the payment processor has made, and they have found to be economically advantageous to them. But if I were to go with 2.9%, basically because this is a flat rate, you pay 2.9% on all your transactions, even if the actual interchange rate varies between the different transactions. So again, this is kind of cool because it gives you more clarity, it gives you more flexibility. So depending on your business and the volume you are processing every month, this may mean that your business is paying more than it needs to for payment processing. So everything also, in addition to geography and also economic sector, your transactional volume, your transactional batch will also play an important role when it comes to the different payment processing tiers. Okay, payment processing tiers in terms of pricing. One thing I want to say here is that if you have any questions, it's always better to ask your provider, have a conversation with them as to what really works for you and what doesn't work for you. It's one of those things where sometimes 30 minutes spent having a conversation with a provider can really save you hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars in merchant fees across over time. Because if you were to pay like 100 extra every single statement, that's $1,200. Okay, that's $1,200 right there, and it can really add up real fast. So one thing I want to say here is that many merchants, maybe that's you, maybe that's me, but many merchants are lured. They are lured by the simple nature of a flat rate pricing because they think it's very simple, right? It's flat rate pricing, very simple, very straightforward, and only having to be aware of a single fee for all transactions. That's really good for a lot of merchants, but those merchants may eventually realize that their business has outgrown this model or could have been saving money with another processor all along. That's why I was just telling you, it's just better to take 30 minutes and have a conversation face to face, not face to face, but over the phone with your merchant to see what kind of pricing model they have. So while this pricing model, I'm speaking here about the flat rate pricing, may seem simple or easier to understand, you want to really compare with other pricing models to ensure that you are in fact getting the best deal possible for your business. Again, going back to what I said, your geography, your demographics, but also the transactional volume will play an important role to determine whether or not a specific pricing model is good for you. And one thing for sure, the economy also. See, the thing is that during COVID, a lot of merchants were losing money because they actually they had a pricing model that was based on transactional volume, and as soon as the transactional volume went down because of COVID, because people were home, they started getting charged way more by their merchants because the merchant had a clause in their contract that says, hey, listen, if we don't get a certain minimum every month, we will charge you a certain amount. And back before COVID, a lot of merchants were okay with that. And when COVID hit and everybody was home and revenue went down, they still found themselves actually paying a lot more. So bottom line is what the moral of the story is that you want to really understand different cycles that your business will have to go through. Of course, COVID was something extreme. Nobody could have prevented that, could have foreseen it. But it's one of those things where you have to be clear that it could happen. It could happen. Anything else could happen. It could be something else tomorrow. Yesterday was COVID. Tomorrow could be something else. So think about that before choosing flat rate pricing. Next, I want to talk to you about tiered pricing. I'm still talking to you about understanding different payment processing pricing tiers. Okay. So tiered pricing, let's have a conversation about that. So when you think about tiered pricing, I want you to think about flexibility. I want you to think about actually a pricing model that adds an extra layer of transparency because things are tiered, right? It depends on the layer the layer where you are at. So tiered pricing usually consists of having a lower qualified rate for certain transactions and higher mid and non-qualified rates for others. Let me break it down for you. First of all, let me repeat it. Tiered pricing usually consists of having a lower qualified rate for certain transactions and higher mid and non-qualified rates for others. So the bottom line here for you is to basically have transactions that qualify for quote unquote qualified, right? That really can be categorized as qualified because when you have qualified transactions, you have a low rate. When you have mid or non-qualified transactions, you have higher rates. That's just the gist of it. Now, sometimes what happens here is that a lot of merchants they receive their statements and they realize that they thought certain transactions were qualified, only to realize that those transactions were labeled as mid or non-qualified by the processor, by the payment processor. So this is something to really think about. Now, one thing for sure, when you think about tiered pricing, I want you to think about the most common pricing method in the US. Now, the common drawback is that merchants are enticed with a low qualified rates, which usually only applies to a very select few types of cards, but nearly all transactions end up in the higher mid and non-qualified tiers. So before you choose such a pricing model, you want to really have a clear understanding of your transactions, your demographics. So if you go through your transactions, you will see the types of cards that your clients, that your customers usually use. And you can see if those cards and those transactions would qualify for they would be categorized as low rate or high rate. It's one of those. It's very easy. It's easier to do than you think. Okay, it just takes some analysis. So the thing is, if you are thinking about actually, if you're considering signing a contract with a merchant who offers tiered pricing, make sure you have a good grasp of the cards the credit cards that qualify for the lower rate and which cards your customers are currently using for transactions. That's what I just told you in terms of understanding your demographics. Now, sometimes it can be a little complicated if your demographics are actually scattered around multiple geographies. Let's say you have customers in Asia, you have customers in Africa, you have customers in the States, you have customers in Brazil, you have customers everywhere. Then it can be a little complicated to really make a determination as to what kind of cards overall your customers use. But here, the thing is, the longer history you have, the better. So if you analyze your transaction statement over, let's say, 6 months versus 12 months, you'll start seeing some patterns. You'll start seeing some evolution. You'll start seeing some benchmarking items, and you can actually base your analysis on those benchmarking items to really predict what the future, and not predict, but really forecast what kind of trends you will have in the future, right? The whole thing is that you need to really know so that you can really negotiate with your payment processor beforehand. Now, even if qualified transactions are cheaper and non-qualified and other transactions are more expensive, you still have the possibility to negotiate with your payment processor right off the bat. See, those negotiations are easier when done beforehand. If you're able to negotiate beforehand, then you're good to go. If you negotiate afterwards, then you really are like in a lot of trouble, right? But if you can negotiate beforehand, you have the possibility to say, okay, this is the kind of conditions that I'm comfortable accepting, and those are the conditions I'm not comfortable accepting. You always are in control. You always are in you always have control in terms of what you will allow and what you will not allow, and that's really important, especially from a scalability point of view. You have the possibility to get things done real fast. Okay, and also one thing I want to say is that whether you choose interchange plus pricing, flat rate pricing, tiered pricing, remember that you always have the possibility to change. You can change the pricing tier as you go along. That's totally possible. So another category I want to talk to you here in terms of pricing is the differential pricing. So while less common in the US, interchange differential is commonly something you see in Canada. So a lot of Canadian processors use differential pricing. Now the thing is, the differential pricing is kind of also similar to tiered pricing. Okay, so what happens here is that qualified and non-qualified fees are charged, but merchants are also charged interchange differential fees for credit cards, which puts pads, which further pads the processor margins. See, the whole thing is when you think about pricing, you have to think about cash outflows and cash inflows. So if you have differential pricing, you really are putting a lot of cash in the payment processors' pockets. Really, I mean, their coffers will be filled real fast. Okay, so basically, what happens here is that if you consent to a differential pricing model, you actually pay multiple fees on the same transaction, essentially being double billed. Okay, this is double dipping. Then this is really bad. So understanding how each of the differential pricing tiers will affect your specific business will help you save money, a lot of cash down the road. Okay, so be very careful as to what you sign, what you agree on, especially if you are dealing with, let's say, a merchant provider whose whose reputation is not really where it should be at. Okay, it's one of those things where you have payment processors who are maybe doing the right thing, and payment processors who are trying to cut corners. Okay, so what I want to say here is that whether you go with the interchange plus pricing, flat rate pricing, tiered pricing, and differential pricing, remember that you always have the possibility, as I said to you a couple of minutes ago, the possibility to switch. You can switch from interchange plus pricing to a differential pricing to tiered pricing to or flat rate pricing, depending on your business. Your business has to adapt to conditions, and you have to adapt to conditions too. And your pricing tiers, for that matter, your pricing tiers, you have to also adapt. Now, the negotiation in terms of pricing tier, this may come from your provider or from you, right? In other words, to change the pricing, you can actually you can have something coming from your provider, but it's one of those things where you want to negotiate real hard. You want to negotiate real hard with your provider, because once you actually agree to terms and conditions, it might take a couple of years for you to come back. And if you want to get out of that contract, they will charge you like early termination fees, which you do not want to have anyway. In conclusion to this conversation, I spoke to you about understanding different payment processing tiers. I gave you the facts and now the conclusion. In terms of facts, you have interchange plus pricing, flat rate pricing, tiered pricing, and differential pricing. Thank you so much. God bless you. I'll see you next time. Until then, remember, stay marvelous.